And without any further ado, Michael Christie to do a reading from Perescope, the world's leading purveyor of exposés of fraud in the watch industry.
In November 2021, an early Omega Speedmaster Ref 2915-1 Broad Arrow featuring a stunning tropical dial went supersonic at a Philips auction in Geneva, reaching a face-distorting G-force of 3.115 million Swiss francs, including buyer's premium. An absolute record for Omega. The previous record-breaking Speedmaster had only fetched 408.5 thousand. And guess what? One of them is fake.
This is maybe one of the most insane cases of fraud and deception and thievery in watch, maybe history, one of the most.
Yes, this is groundbreaking because Omega agrees.
Omega agrees.
A brand agrees.
Which never happens.
That's why it's groundbreaking.
Never happens. What's up, watch fan? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop.
My name is Michael, and this video is sponsored by Exter. More on that later.
So, okay, let's break this down. There's a lot to unpack here. This is a huge case of fraud that involves Omega, the Omega Museum. It involves Philips auctions. It involves whistleblowers, right? This involves Perescope, who's a famous whistleblower. This involves Bloomberg. This is serious.
This isn't an article that stays on Perescope's blog, which, as nice as it is not that famous in the world. This is one that goes across 10 different paid sources where it's news. It's news.
Exactly. And frankly, all of these publications should be giving credit and encouraging people to explore Perescope. I know that gets dicey because you don't want to endorse someone you don't know everything about. I understand that.
Yes.
But this guy has been doing, God's work for a while in this fraud identification or, red flag kind of world. It's amazing. Okay, so the long and short of it, right? The super high end, version of it.
Yes.
These are two photos of two different watches.
Yes.
Okay. The first one is how much does this watch sell for?
€200,000.
This is a $200,000 Omega Speedmaster Broad Arrow. This is a rare watch.
Yes.
Okay. On the other side is a 3.115 million Omega Speedmaster. These are in many ways the same exact watch, and they are the same exact watch. They're the same exact watch because not because the market changed and everything fluctuated, everything went up. That's not what happened. Okay, someone took the dial on the $230,000 watch, right?
Threw it in an oven, did expert paint work. They altered this watch. Never disclosed it, put it in another watch, changed the bezel, changed the movement. They basically created a Frankenstein that was so perfect that it almost should have been a red flag, but basically completely fake, okay? And put it at auction, at Philips auction. Philips did not catch it, or if they did, they said nothing about it, and the watch sold for over $3 million. How did the watch sell for over $3 million? Who bought the watch?
Well, Omega bought the watch. Why would Omega pay over $3 million for this Omega Speedmaster when the previous record for Omega Speedmasters is under $500,000? Is because Omega was being told by their museum director, correct, that this watch is an important piece of history that Omega needs to have in their collection. And
no matter what. We need this watch.
No number is too high, right? Just keep bidding. We need this watch. Omega naturally trusts their museum director. This is the guy that Omega places all of their faith in when it comes to the curation of vintage models. And frankly, $3.5 million probably isn't the end of the world to Omega.
Right.
And they bought it. But Omega's museum director was in on the fraud. Omega's museum director had some sort of kickback situation with this watch, played a part in assembling this watch, and encouraged Omega to ultimately do the bidding that he and his felonious cohorts would ultimately benefit from. Yes. This is a remarkable fraud. Frankly, it was genius, and it almost worked.
Yes.
If it wasn't for that mangy mutt. If it wasn't for Scooby-Doo.
And it's remarkable because it broke the barrier of being in the watch circle.
Yes.
It is now worldwide news, and that is because Omega is the one that bought it.
Omega's the one that bought it. Let's talk about the difference between
what is a proper watch restoration? Because watches can be restored.
Yes.
Okay, respectfully.
Of course.
But then there's a different when it becomes fraudulent.
Exactly. The best example is my Rolex day date, and I know it's happened to you plenty of times, but the Rolex day date that I had was all correct, and eBay said it's not real. This dial is redone. We don't recognize this dial.
Right.
But that's one example where something did exist, but you're asking a watchmaker, not a watch authenticator, to say if something's real, and they haven't seen it. But, even then, over time, things can also get replaced or changed and still be factory correct.
Right. There are a couple of things going on here. Number one, to say something is real or fake or original or genuine or any of this, you're only the review or the opinion is only as good as the expert, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, eBay was a bad expert, right?
Yeah.
Rolex themselves are very guilty of this as a company. Rolex themselves do a piss poor job at not at authenticating watches, but at doing historical background, at really taking care of their own vintage watches. So that's why it was so surprising when Omega really kind of grabbed the narrative here and recognized what had happened. This is super surprising.
Most brands would be like, we're not commenting.
We're never commenting. Everyone shut up. Like, no one talks.
Just move on. That's not us.
Exactly.
But interestingly, they're the ones that bought it. So they kind of have to weigh in very fast.
Exactly. Okay, so we can understand the difference between real and fake, right? Real means that it was manufactured by the manufacturer. Fake means that it was manufactured by someone else, that it is a reproduction, okay? Yep. Obviously, when you're in watches, which are an art form, but not like traditional art, there are thousands of originals, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in art, there is one Starry Night, right?
Exactly.
And that is it, right?
Yes.
And everything else is fake. With this, it is different. It is different than that. Now, the next layer is correct. Correct means of the period. It means correct to the watch. So if I have, a Cartier, here's a good example, right? I'm wearing a Cartier Tank Normal, okay? This is an immaculate example.
If I wanted to get that in the Theo and Harris watch shop, I can't get that one, right?
You can't get this one in the Theo and Harris watch shop because it is my personal collection, but you could get something like it in the Theo and Harris watch shop. But if I had this watch and the dial was really damaged, okay, I could go on the market and buy a correct dial. Right? It would cost me thousands of dollars to do it.
Yes.
But I could buy a dial that would be basically a donor, right?
Yeah.
And the only way you would ever be able to know that it was not original to the watch, but just correct to the period, would be if I told you, because it is identical.
Right.
It would be identical.
There's no markings on the dial. There's nothing that would say this is an incorrect dial, or not even incorrect. This is a dial from a different watch, or this is a dial that was never put into a watch.
It would be absolutely no way to tell. Okay, yes. And that's not in the vintage watch world. That is not even looked at as taboo. That is common practice. This watch is original, so far as I could possibly tell.
Yeah.
But that is completely normal. It's very similar in cars. It's very similar in collectors' hobbies like this when it comes to vintage items. You can do a resto mod, which you're involving, other sorts of parts, non-correct parts, still great parts, but non-correct, or you can do it the correct way. Okay, right. So that's a little bit of foundation as to, what restoration looks like in the vintage watch world.
Yes.
But that is not what happened here. Michael?
That is not what happened here at all. So the watch got auctioned, the watch sold, $3 million. Everybody was freaking out. That smashed all the records. And then, of course, it being 2023 and the internet now being very, very in the watch world, pictures started to come out of a different watch, with less than appealing lume that had a greenish hint to it, different hands, a different bezel, and a much, much later movement. So all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, interesting, this is a very similar watch, until, of course, you look at the watch side by side and start to see there is no way there is this perfect scratch on the dial on this watch and on this different watch, or on XYZ, and we'll dive into it in a second. But really, people started to see the real picture, and the big telltale sign, if you see this picture, is this kind of clearly reloomed and also kind of gross-looking lume.
Yes.
That then is modified to be the perfect toasted lume.
Wow.
And when experts were first looking at it, experts being Periscope and people like that, the first thing they said was like, the lume doesn't look like it deteriorated correctly. See how it's all grainy? They're like, that's not typical for a Speedmaster of this era. And then we'll get into it in a second, because Periscope is really a beast. He says he looks through his archives and he was sourcing pieces of this watch
from different auctioned watches.
Yes.
So we'll get into that in a second. But what do you think about it so far?
So far, this is, kind of common, right? This does happen at auction. A watch may underperform, and then you will see that same watch, slightly modified, reappear years later. I've seen it with Paul Newman Daytonas, and the way that you tell could be, it's these little spots of aging, right? Maybe the way that paint fell off in some writing somewhere, that it's just so specific that you could match it to a watch later on, right? Like in this case, a scratch. You can tell, that scratch is so unique. It is so, it's one of one, right?
I mean, how are you going to scratch something like that? How and why? What happened?
Exactly. So these things do happen, and these watches can be modified and then fetch much greater numbers, especially when an auction house puts more marketing behind it or whatever. But this result was not just a product of good marketing, because this didn't ultimately go to a retail bidder.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, this went to a museum.
This video is brought to you by Exter. Today we are looking at their Parliament wallet, which if you have been looking for a wallet, you at one point have seen this wallet.
My problem with a lot of these kind of new age, techie wallets that have great compartments for credit cards is they really are so techie and like kind of like a little dorky, what I mean?
Not your style.
Not my style, But I love the Parliament, right? Because it really is more. It's really more my style. It's not as like sporty in its design. It's really more of like this elegant wallet, but with great capacity, right? Yeah. It's amazing.
1 to 12 cards can fit in it. You have this little button at the bottom that fans all of your cards out, so you're not fumbling when you need to pull a card out. It can block RFID when people are trying to steal those credit cards,
which is huge. And it's got this really interesting tracker card.
Yes, we don't want a lot of technology in a wallet until, of course, you lose your wallet.
Right.
And you're like, I wish there was something that could help me find it.
Exactly.
Bring in the tracker card. And the great part about it is that you can take it out of your wallet if you ever don't want it.
Right.
You can leave it somewhere. But this is so you can ring your wallet from your phone, or ring actually the other way around. You could ring your phone from your wallet, weirdly enough. But really, it makes everything 10 times easier because you're not scrambling around the house trying to find something. And it's slim enough where you won't even notice it.
The rest of the Parliament is great. I really do love the product, but the tracker card is hysterical, right? It's something that we've all wanted before in our wallet. It's like,
exactly.
Where's my wallet? Constantly. I'm always saying that. So if you are like me and you also lose your wallet and you want a better and more beautiful one, definitely take a look at Exter, and the link is down in our bio.
Yes, it is.
Take a look.
Something that was really noticeable right away, and one of the reasons why this watch set such a high record, is because the patina on the dial wasn't perfect, it was ungodly.
Yeah.
And now you see, if we're talking about a Rolex, for example, what do you see as a really nice patina dial? Go different color dials. Like, what do you see?
In perfect patina? I mean, perfect
the best
caramel
what you've seen.
Patina with perfect caramel, right? When black turns to just this beautiful shade of brown, a flawless, right? I mean, without spotting, right? It just, it's truly breathtaking. It happens in Submariners, it happens in Daytonas, very rarely, but that aging is worth, just hundreds of thousands of dollars in the right circumstance. And in this case, it was worth $3 million.
Exactly. And even the most perfect patina, I shouldn't say the most perfect, but when you get even this level of perfect, you expect to see some sign of the old dial, of the black, of something. And just something that looks like it's printed in a different color is virtually impossible. These still have some organic materials on them that doesn't age like that. So when people were looking at that dial, the first thing they said was just, that dial is unbelievably clean. There's not a single speck. It's just a flat brown.
Which is already, red flag. That could be the most incredible thing in the world, or it sometimes when it's too good to be true, it is.
Right. And it
ultimately was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's one of those things where it's just like, wow, the odds of something like that, with all these other factors, are incredibly low.
Right.
And it should be technically above 3 million then if you're getting something like that. But it did kind of make sense for a little bit, because you'd assume this watch is heavily worn with that tropical patina. And the case was worn, but obviously it still would just be unbelievably clean. Okay, so essentially Periscope and a bunch of people actually dropped this news when it came out. I think Periscope may have been the leader, and then Bloomberg jumped in. There's a ton of articles behind paywalls. That's how you know it's important. Yep. And things started to go nuts because if we look at this watch, we're looking at this picture specifically. This watch is a 2915-2 made for Freza Herrera? Whoever. It's made for the Peruvian Air Force in 1959. That watch sold for 200,000 euros at an auction house in 2019 and is now part of the collection of Watch Crew. What's interesting is if we look at the dial, you'll notice what we were talking about, those unbelievably small characteristics that only come on one watch that can't be replicated. Right. So it's essentially confirmed that these are the same dials. And since that lume on the right has that greenish hint, and on the left it's kind of burnt in now, it looks like the dial was modified to then present like that. And that's why the brown patina is now so clean.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then this is where the sleuthing kind of gets insane for Periscope. He says, as mentioned earlier, the bezels are different. A quick search in my extensive database revealed the current bezel was taken from a late Speedmaster broad arrow, reference 2915-2, with this movement auctioned by Phillips. And if you look at the bezels, it's the exact same bezel. Wow. That is crazy. That got through the cracks up until it sold, and then it came back. But this watch is something that one person can't do because you're touching all of these huge people, these huge names, and getting all of these tiny specific parts. So what do you think of that so far?
I mean, the first thing I can just think of is the cooperation that would need to go into something like this.
That's what I'm saying.
Remarkable, you know? It's like just how do you get this many people on the same page, to say, hey, I need your bezel, I need that dial, I need this. That's not just one man, right? I mean, this is a lot. This is a lot of moving parts, pardon the pun.
To be honest too, it's way easier, I'd imagine, to just make a fake dial, make a fake bezel, and make it look fine.
Yeah, for some people can do it.
I'm not saying easier to do really even from a stance of making it, but from a logistics point and from a risk factor. Like, you're touching all of these big watches that have a lot of people looking at them all the time.
Yeah, right.
At that point, be like, I'll just give it a shot, see if I can make a dial and sand it down or something like that. So the story that was reported from one of the largest Swiss newspapers is Omega investigated the case of the watch and found evidence that 3 former employees with criminal intentions were involved in this operation. The 3 confessed to having acted fraudulently and criminally, and Omega examined it, whatever, and established that, yes, they are fake. But Omega did their own research, found 3 employees that were behind this. Apparently it goes that one of the employees, when Omega, the brand, was bidding on this, was like, no, we need that watch at all costs. You have to get that watch. That is something that needs to be in a museum. Like, no cost is too high.
Right.
Which makes total sense when you're making the watch.
And then ultimately all these people, including that guy, were going to get massive kickbacks.
Oh, yeah, of course. This was going to be... I don't know if this was going to be their big score or the beginning of a big score. Right. And slowly, there's crazy Omegas coming out more and more. Interestingly, obviously, the reason this blew up and the reason it hasn't blown up on other watches as much, it still blows up in the smaller circle, is because now the brand is being touched. Right. It's not, I don't know, like that happened, because Omega made a lot of Speedmasters and they continue to make a lot of Speedmasters. So when it gets out into the wild, it's not news when people are trying to get more.
Right.
But when the own brand buys it, and you find out that there was internal fraud, what happens to the watch world? Because when you go all the way to the people that made the watch and they're still duped,
even they don't know, right?
What happens?
Really, the message here is you're only as good as the people around you that you're trusting, right? That's it. I mean, the people that Omega trust, whether it be the historian or whoever the individuals were at Omega that were putting this watch together or telling the company to buy it, if those people are compromised, what is Omega's fail-safe? I mean, well, you need double verification, you need triple verification. How many layers of people need to be equals in their say of something like this?
Yes.
What about Phillips? To what degree are they culpable? I mean, Phillips at this point has been involved in so much scandal. It's truly insane. They're like Teflon. Like, it seems that nothing is sticking. Like, even though they are responsible for auctioning what I know of
8 or 9, it's probably far more than that, watches that were just either, Frankenstein or basically fake. Watches that were worth nothing compared to what they sold for, right?
Wow.
They're guilty of this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And yet really no one seems to care. Or at least this is the first time that any major publication seems to care. I made a big stink not that long ago about, we made a big stink about the unicorn, right? About the Rolex Daytona white gold, that the same thing happened. You have a big surprising auction result, millions of dollars at auction.
Yes.
And then you go back and look through the archives, right? Different people's archives, and you're like, oh wait, that watch was not original. The case is from here, the bezel's from there, the pushers they're just fake. The dial's a replacement. The bracelet we knew was a replacement. And you're like, well, so what does Phillips mean? What does the word Phillips mean then?
Interesting.
Interesting.
Phillips,
Phillips is charismatic. That's what Phillips is.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
It's a legendary name.
That's not a
It's where
compliment.
history is.
It's not a compliment.
Yeah.
Auto Box is truly one of the most charismatic salespeople I've ever seen in my life. The guy is so well groomed.
Yeah.
But the team behind is just they're just not doing a great job.
Yeah.
And the cop out for all these auction houses is always, it's impossible for us to do the research necessary to verify all of these watches. It's impossible. It would take so much time. It's not possible. So we do our best. But then you have someone like Perezco that claims that certainly was on the Phillips payroll to help.
Oh, he was?
To help catch watches. And then he says that when he caught some watches, they ignored him.
Really?
So it's like, okay, so it reminds me very much of when a lot of these big corporations buy sensitivity training. It really is. It's like, no, well, we're paying the guy, so that couldn't have happened here. They're just buying an insurance policy against when the bad thing happens. They're not actually trying to avoid the bad thing.
Right.
That doesn't matter. It's just to say, no, we've got 16 guys on staff, which are being paid whatever,
sure,
to make sure these watches are real. We did our due diligence. There's no way.
Wow.
So
fascinating.
it's a crock of shit.
Yeah.
So that again, this is exactly this is why I was always afraid to get into like the really heavy watch business, like super expensive stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's just too much to gain.
There's too much to gain, and it's virtually impossible.
There's too much to gain to commit fraud.
Yes, of course. There's too much. Yeah, you're afraid it's your business.
I'm like, that's like the Polish business model. Like, there's too much money, and I couldn't possibly go in.
The interesting part is that, like, you look at someone like Prescope, who's like, I'm looking in my database at these files. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at that. That's why it's so hard. Because if you miss one thing, you're done. And this wasn't one thing. You missed 3 things, 4 things, and all of a sudden, your brand is soiled. 2 brands are soiled.
Right.
And you have all of a sudden articles like Bloomberg being like, okay, so just wanted to let everybody know, like, the watch world is also experiencing a lot of fraud.
Right, and listen, fraud exists in all of these auction industries, all these things.
Whenever there's things
art,
with that much money, there's a lot of things behind that much money.
Of course, and it happens, right? And mistakes happen. But when it looks like they're not mistakes, that's when you say, oh, wow, this is brutal. This isn't a simple mistake. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, when you buy from an auction house, Phillips being a great example, you're the one that is taking responsibility for the authenticity of the watch. They take 0.
Oh.
0. It's in like their policy.
Yeah, it has to be right.
0. So will Omega get their money back? Not that they care.
Right.
But what if it was an individual?
Wow, fascinating. I did not know that.
No, 0. How about on another Phillips auction, a Panerai? Okay? Listen to this. Peresco found a Panerai that the serial number was photoshopped on.
What?
Photoshopped on.
Really?
So the photo that was shown to the market was not actually a representation of the watch.
Really?
I don't know. I think that's where we're getting that to the level of, I don't want to sue you. I want to have a conversation. Not like, you stole from me.
Wow.
You stole.
What the hell?
You stole.
Really?
Like, does anyone else feel that? Like, does anyone else feel like this isn't a mistake? This isn't a mistake. Mistakes, listen, that's all good. Mistakes happen. Make it right. We're all good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, look at this.
No problem. But you're going to tell me that you, RO Box, or I'm sorry, guys, listen, it sucks. I almost hate being this guy because I come on YouTube and I talk to some even though the shit is true. And then I will go to a Phillips auction, right? Like, not often, but when a buddy of mine is in town, we'll go. And I kind of do feel bad because it's like, not Aural, right? The other guys and the other girls that are there. Like, when I talk shit about Phillips,
it gets to Phillips.
It gets to Phillips, and you know, the individual that works at Phillips might look at me and say, like, dude, this is my livelihood. Fuck off. So I do kind of feel bad. I do kind of feel like, yeah, you know, I'm talking shit for no personal gain. Like, I don't need to talk about this. We could avoid this subject entirely.
Yeah, of course.
So I do feel a little bad on that level, you know, because not everyone's evil. Not everyone is the evil mastermind behind these things.
Yeah.
But it's also like, sorry, stop working for a f***ing thieving company. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and the funniest thing, and I don't want to tie right now, but the funniest thing is these people, right? These, you know, my grandfather would go like this. These people with their noses in the air, like these hoity-toity, like they have an extra rib, right? They speak all these different languages. They wear fine Laurel Piana jackets, and they don't curse, blah, 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 and they're all fucking frauds. They're all fucking thieves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's a, you know, the whole thing is a fraud. I mean, it's just
you're wined and dined, and then you leave, and
you're 60 fucking nine. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, it's brutal, and it's brutal. It's brutal. You know, say what you want about maybe my profanity and my ostentatious gold watches, as opposed to your, you know, fine, you know, discreet watches. But listen,
your fine platinum Calatrava 96 that was $800,000.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll take me and my regular bunch of people that just don't steal from people any day of the week over you and your, you know, arrogant, thieving people. I really, you know, whatever. That's how I feel. That's how I feel.
It's just a YouTube
Welcome
video.
to our little house on the hill. You know, my favorite Shakespeare quote: "Take the fucking money."
Oh, I want to spoil something about that, but I won't, just in case.
So anyway, that's the story.
Yeah.
So now here's a question to you.
Lay on.
Not that either of us have any indication as to what would happen. What happens to the people that committed this fraud? At Omega, the Omega people. Because at Phillips, we know nothing will happen. Of course. That goes without saying.
Phillips went to work, you're like... There's all these newspapers, people are rioting, they're like...
That would be funny. That would be a funny video. The world's exploding. So what happens? Does Omega prosecute? I'm not familiar with Swiss law, so I don't...
I'm not familiar with Swiss laws, but I believe, in my opinion... When this article came out, Peresco maybe was like, uh-oh, I hope this doesn't catch on. But Bloomberg and stuff, Omega probably went in with the fire hose and was just ripping through people. Because this is how you slowly, not right away, but slowly hurt your brand.
Right.
The top comment on this article was like, this is far above my pay grade. I'm going to stick to like a modern day Speedy.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but how long until it becomes, this company is doing something weird. You know what I mean?
Right.
If something else came out, even if it was another case of like a bad employee or something, it's like, wow, you're really, now we're going to be known as the brand that keeps stealing at auctions. To a very small amount of people, but to a very important small amount of people.
Right. But do people care? And the answer is, I mean, some people, but not really, you know. Again, the hyper intelligent guy is the worst client. You know, their whole business model is designed to attract a very small group of international buyers with more money than sense.
You talking about auctions?
Yeah. I mean, everyone was wondering who bought this watch, and you know, I heard it multiple times on social media. Was it someone from the Middle East or someone from China? Because both of those buyer groups are infamous for just having unlimited amounts of money, and you know, they just don't. I don't know if that's to say they don't care would be unfair, but they're probably easier victims.
I want to be the guy in the room that wins the watch.
Yeah.
I want the watch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, look at you know, it's just crazy the money that they have and will spend.
Yeah, right.
Lionel Messi just got an offer for $1.3 billion for 3 years to go play in Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's like, it's just made up. It's just made up. It's made up numbers.
Yeah, right.
What is $3 million for a chronograph? I mean, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's a fucking pimple.
Especially because it's supposed to be the most important chronograph in the world.
Yeah,
and then you have a nerd like Perescope who's like, actually, and they're like, yeah, stop.
Nerd.
Let me buy it. Yeah. Nerd. Anything, we say it all the time, anything in the world that has a lot of money to it, it just happens. It just is going to happen. Watches are going for a lot of money. Different people come in. Houses,
100%.
different people. Art, 100%. Different people. Art and houses is just a lot older.
Yes, 100% right.
It's the same thing.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it until next time.
That's it until 9 minutes from now when Phillips does it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Brutal. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry to Omega for losing $3 million, but if I had your money, I'd burn mine, and so I don't feel that bad. I mean, I do feel bad, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I feel bad for those guys. I thought they pulled it off.
I know.
They walked out of there like Ocean's 11. Yeah. You know those 3 guys left the auction house like...
Those are Terry Benedict's casinos. What do you have against Terry Benedict? Come on.
Come on, that one line in that one Italian film and the one
No, it's not Italian. No, it's Italian in that.
I'm just repeating your script.
You.
At 22 minutes and 37 seconds?
In The Departed? All right, guys, take care.